Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 21, OnslaughtSix and Aerda. This episode is a little late this week because I've been on vacation, so sorry about that, but let's get into it.
Okay, today I'm here with OnslaughtSix. Unusual for going with a screen name there than instead of a more real name. Yeah, what made you go with that?
So we were talking about this off mic. In the Prestige, the Christopher Nolan movie from like '06, there's a moment where Hugh Jackman's character says to his wife, who's trying to get him to use his real name as his stage name. He's a musician. Magician, not a musician. I'm a musician.
Right.
He's a magician. And he says, I promised my family I wouldn't embarrass them with my theatrical endeavors. And I've never been a big fan of my legal name, especially my last name. I got made fun of it in school, and I wasn't into it. And also I grew up on the internet in the early '90s, well, the mid to late '90s, and and the whole mantra there was never tell anyone your real name, never tell anyone your real gender, and never tell anyone where you live. Don't ever tell anyone those three things. And so I very early on took that to heart. I was like, I need a handle. I need a name. They say that in Hackers. It's like, I'm not real till I have a handle.
Right.
So
yeah.
I did that. And I came up with this one based on some embarrassing and quickly outdated Transformers fanfic. And I haven't had anything better since 2002. So I'm stuck with it.
It's a Transformer name?
Yeah.
Okay, I had no idea.
Onslaught is a relatively obscure character from 1986, and there's a long history of him getting re-releases, and it doesn't matter. It's stupid.
Okay. All right. I'll leave that alone. I'm not a big Transformers fan. I was just curious where it came from.
Yeah, we would talk for a half hour about it if about why it's that. So it's not important.
Okay. All right. So usually I also ask people who they are outside of D&D. Sounds like you might not want to get into that. You mentioned you're a musician though?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm fine talking about my life. It's no big deal. I was in a solo metal industrial project for 15 years under the name OnslaughtSix, and 15? Yeah. Jeez. Okay. Where
Cool.
my first song was a song called Tidal Wave, which is where my game company Tidal Wave Games gets its name from. That's also another Transformers reference because I'm a big old dopey Hasbro shill.
I mean that's the whole RPG business basically.
Yeah. So that happens, and I just made industrial metal for 15 years, and I'm in a synthwave band with my wife. We kind of make stuff sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm married into a musical family, so I've learned some stuff from them, but myself I was never that musical growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was big into just listening to like industrial metal all the time. If it came from the mid '90s and had distortion on the vocals, I was in.
Okay. So can you give me an example bands? Like I'm probably heard of a
Nine
few
Inch
of them.
Nails, Skinny Puppy,
Okay.
KMFDM a little bit.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I know Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
Mostly through my Johnny Cash love and then going into them through Hurt, but whatever. I got there. How did you start playing D&D?
This is the fun story. We were a big board game family.
Uh-huh.
We would go around yard sales in the late '90s and early 2000s. Just if there was a board game and it was under $10, we bought it. We didn't even care if it was missing all the pieces or whatever, because chances were good we could cobble something together. Even if the game is missing all the pawn pieces, you just open up Sorry and you have 16 new pawn pieces.
Yeah. Did you ever get a cheap ass game?
What do you mean?
It's an actual company called Cheap Ass Games where they made games without pieces because they knew that you had stuff from Monopoly or Sorry.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, it was like a early 2000s company. I don't think they've produced anything recently, but they're still selling their stuff. Where it's basically just a rule set and a board, and they say, we know you have dice, we know you have pieces, figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So, well, that was a lot of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And one day we see a box that is like, oh, it's Ghostbusters. It's a Ghostbusters board game. It's in a pile of other board games. We pick it up. It's like $10. We take it home. We throw it in the closet of board games, and we don't think about it again for 2 years. Right? One day we're like, hey, we're really bored. We say, Mom, let's play that Ghostbusters game that we bought at the yard sale like 2 years ago or whatever. And so she's like, okay. And she opens it up, and it's just stacks of books and cards. There's no board. There's nothing like that. And then she's like reading through the thing, and she goes, we're not playing this. And I go, what? Why not? And she goes, well, all the players have to read this book. And she holds up this like 32-page book. And then she says, and one of the players has to read this other book that's 120 some pages long. She's like, I don't have time to do all that. That's complicated. This is Ghostbusters. How complicated should it be?
Right.
And so she puts it away, and that's it. Kind of around the same time, I am very interested in Japanese role-playing games and computer role-playing games. One in particular, which is called Wizardry. It's an NES port of an old like Apple II game, and it's basically an AD&D simulator. It literally has THAC0.
Oh God.
Yeah, it literally has that in it, and it has all the familiar classes and races that we're familiar with from those days.
Right.
And it's just, you go into the dungeon, it's like a first-person dungeon crawl, and there are orcs and kobolds and stuff like that. And so as I'm like bumming around on the early internet trying to figure out how to play this stupid game, because the copy protection for the game is that all of the spells are like nonsense words, and you need the manual to look up what the spells are in order to cast them. I actually have the manual right here just because I always keep it around for inspiration. The very first level 1 cleric spell name, Kalki. Translation, blessings. And then it reduces the AC of all party members by 1 point and makes them harder to hit. Okay?
Reduce the skills of THAC0, right.
Right. What if you just go in the game, it's like Kalki or Dios. And I'm like, what do these mean? So I have to look them up on the early internet. And as I'm like reading it, I discover that these are based on a tabletop game called Dungeons and Dragons. And so the idea of the tabletop role-playing game enters my brain for the first time. Right. And then one day I'm looking through the board game thing, and I see the Ghostbusters box again. And I see that it says a frightfully cheerful role-playing game. And I say, wait, what? And now, for the first time as like a 12-year-old, I open it up sort of with the context of what a role-playing game is. And go, oh no, this is a Dungeons and Dragons. But it's Ghostbusters. And that's where I come into it.
Gotcha.
And then from there, I read a bunch of 3rd edition stuff that I pirated in the mid 2000s, and I never played it. I didn't play it until 5th edition came out. No, that's not true. During about 10 years ago. Yeah, because I was still in the apartment. My friend ran an online game over. It would have been Skype back then.
Yeah,
we ran a game over Skype in 3.5.
But, that was about when I was transitioning to Roll20. Was 10 years ago.
But it wasn't really well run, or we weren't really following the rules or giving a shit. We were just having fun.
Honestly, everyone's first campaign is pretty much like that.
Right.
Yeah. You don't have some older person to rein you in that's been playing for years that wants to play by the rules, then you're not going to.
Anyway, and then around 2018, me and some friends, we picked up the 5th edition starter set, and we tried to play it, and we were upset that we couldn't make our own characters, so we bought the player's handbook, and we went from there.
Okay. Yeah. So when did you transition to being more of a DM? Was that in 2018 or after that?
We started playing in January of 2018, and I literally think by July I had started my own game.
Okay.
I had tried running my own game, and it at first didn't go well, because I had a feeling I had run the Ghostbusters game a little bit for my brother and my dad, and that didn't go well either because I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And didn't really, and I don't think they actually wanted to play, so it's sort of like I'm dragging them through this horrifying experience as I confusingly don't understand all the rules and everything. So what happened was I'm reading the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure, and I'm like, okay, well, this is the starter set adventure. It's gotta be this is what they recommend you start with. I'm a newer DM. I think I have a handle on this because in the intervening years, I had been like D&D curious. I had really there was one moment I remember where I started watching the Acquisitions Inc. videos that Penny Arcade does, which is like their actual play. And Chris Perkins, who is one of the 5th edition lead designers and who's worked at Wizards of the Coast since like 97 and might be one of the best DMs in the world, was running them through this. And I didn't know he was Chris Perkins, who works for D&D. I thought he was Jerry's DM. I thought he was like an old friend of Jerry's who was their DM. That's what I thought. So I'm just watching him run the game, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I think I could probably do this. Right? It doesn't seem like what he's doing is that hard.
I guess there's an element of that, but okay.
I didn't know that he was literally one of the best doing it, but whatever. And so I'm like, well, okay, this adventure is designed to have me start it. And so I had my own, but the problem is I had my own ideas. The players get to the Red Brand hideout, and the Red Brand hideout is, if you haven't played the adventure or seen it, there's a bunch of human bandits who live in a basement in town. And that's all that's going on. It's the most, and I'm reading it, and I'm in my head, I'm like, this is the most banal, boring, trite shit that I've ever read.
Yeah, it's like the first mission in every Elder Scrolls game where it's just like, go into a basement.
50 years of history for this game, and this is what you're giving me? In my head, I was like, this would be more interesting if the stats didn't change, or even the situation, but they're dwarves. Suddenly, that's more interesting to me. But in my head, I'm like, I won't change it. I'm just going to run it as it's written and see what happens. And it was a disaster because I was dispassionate about the material, and that showed in my DM. And the players started to screw around and act out and not take it seriously, and it fell apart as a result of that.
Gotcha.
And so a couple more months go by, and my main DM for the game has to take a break. Like we're playing a weekly game, and then I run another game for some friends, and it falls apart. And then my DM for that other game, he has to take a break. He has some family stuff. He's like, I can't play maybe ever again, or maybe this will only be a couple months. Maybe it won't be at all. And I'm like, well, okay, I've ran a couple times. Let's see I'll step up and see what happens. And I immediately am like, okay, I'm not going to use that adventure because I'm not inspired by it. What adventures am I inspired by? There's 50 years of history here. There's got to be something. And I start watching Matt Colville's videos online because I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I look up, how do I get started DMing? And Matt Colville's videos start to come up. This is in like 2019.
Yeah, those are good videos.
And so he recommends the adventure N1 Against the Cult of the Reptile God. And it's like $5 online. And I read it, and I'm like, this is really cool. I'm inspired by this. There's a town with an evil cult to a reptile god. It's right there in the title. Right. The dungeon is really cool and inspiring. There's all sorts of weird stuff. And yeah, it's a first edition adventure, but an owlbear is an owlbear if it's 1979 or 2009 or 2019. It's the same. They don't change that much. And so I ran that, and we had a blast, and everything hooked together then.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it does seem like you could just basically drop the first edition stats and use the 5th edition stats and make it work.
That's exactly what I've done. I've ran adventures for every edition of the game in 5th edition, and that's how it works.
Okay. Yeah, 4th edition seems like that'd be the hardest one to transfer that way.
Nope. I ran a whole 1 to 5 campaign based on a 4th edition book called Reavers of Harkenwald, and it was a blast.
Okay.
But I also, one of the things I did is the first thing I did when I got Against the Cult of the Reptile God is it is written in 1981. So every NPC is a human and a male. That's just the way that's just the attitude of the people who made the game. So the first thing I did was I made a list of all the NPCs that were in the town, and I crossed out a bunch of names and rewrote them to either be female or a dwarf or an orc or a half elf or whatever,
Right.
and that process alone of just being like, I don't like this, I'm gonna change it, it's my game, immediately instilled a sense in me of like, I can change whatever I want. It's okay. And it'll my senses of what's gonna be fun are better than whoever wrote this adventure who doesn't know who me or my group is.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that's best for modules. Like, I always had this fear that I was gonna like mess something up because I remembered it wrong and it was gonna affect some other part of the module. So I had to like
90% of the time it doesn't affect the rest of the module.
Right, yeah.
And in the 10% that it does, the players don't know that yet, so you can fix it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, when I was running modules, I didn't have that concept yet. I was still being like, oh, I got to do it the way it's supposed to be done. Because like you, I was also using modules before I wanted to do my own stuff. I'm assuming you're doing your own stuff now. Is that right?
No, I still run modules every.
Oh, okay.
What I usually do is here's the thing. I use modules as inspiration in source books now.
Uh-huh.
What I do is like, and I tell people this: you can buy a module and just take the maps and use nothing else from it. Just take the maps that are in that and write your own encounters around it. Or take a map that you found in one place and take the encounters from another thing and just stick them both together. And now you have a whole new thing that's a unique experience that no one else is going to have.
I've definitely taken maps from stuff. That's good advice.
I'm running a big Underdark crawl right now that is almost done. And I took this Mushroom Cave map from Dice and Logos, and I took 2 encounters from the Dragon Hatchery that are in Hoard of the Dragon Queen, because the plot is sort of that all of these Dragonborn have taken a bunch of money, and they're a cult of Takesis, and they're going to use all of the money, which is actually the money that's at the end of the 5th edition module Dragon Heist. They stole that money out from out from some other group of players, and then they've transported it across the world so that they're going to summon Takesis at the Pool of Radiance from 1st edition and the PC game Pool of Radiance. That location, but the dungeon around it is the Gates of Firestorm Peak from 2nd edition. But this last Underdark encounter, I used a map from Dice and Logos, I used the Dragon Hatchery stuff from Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and I used a bunch of Myconid stuff from a different adventure that I bought for like $3.
Damn, that is a lot of stitching together to make that work.
But it's just like one little part here, one little thing there, this, that, and the other. And now I have a list of like 6 things, and that's my game for tonight.
Cool. Yeah, I've never done something that extreme with using modules where I'm like, using sounded like 5 different modules that you're putting together to make a single adventure.
Bits and pieces of each. Yeah.
So are you setting your campaign in Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, or like is this all sort of in your own setting that you're making everything fit in?
Every 5th edition game that I have ever run takes place in my own setting.
Okay.
In fact, all of them take place in the same 2-month period. I have a calendar to keep track so that none of the characters run into each other.
Oh, that's funny. Just 2 months? Like, so time hasn't really passed at all? It's all like the same?
No. Well, the current campaign that I'm in is the first one that's in the future of those 2 months. Just because I had to set it that way because it's a sequel to one of the other things.
Okay.
But I got these guys doing the one thing in the city, and these guys are doing this up here, and these guys are there. But they all take place within the same world. So they all have little references to each other. Characters go from one campaign to the next.
Okay. I've never heard of a DMing strategy this way where you're just using modules and then still putting a ton of your own spin on it. And like I've heard of people doing like adventure paths, where they just do the whole like N1 through N5 kind of thing for against the Cult of the Reptile God, for example. But your way is really unique. I like it. Yeah,
I like to just grab like overarching plots and then slot in other stuff on the side, because one of my other philosophies is that I think the world should be alive and not focused on the players. Meaning that even if the players are on this A to B plot, there should be a completely unrelated plot that intersects in the middle, and then they never see again. I was running one of my other campaigns where an important NPC gives the players a job. He says, "Hey, go. These orcs are transporting cargo to the bad guy's stronghold. We found out this because we have scouts. Go intercept the cart and steal what they have. That way, they don't have the supplies. We don't even know what the supplies are, but we know it's going to the bad guy fortress, so it has to be important." And so
Right.
they go there, and there are these orcs, and they have a big caravan. And one of the players is like, "I'm going to sneak into the caravan, and I'm going to look and see what they're transporting, so we have an idea what they're dealing with." And it's a big dragon egg, right? And so they're like, "Oh, it's a dragon egg. This is bad," right? And then as they're about to ambush the orcs, a bunch of drow show up and kill the orcs and also start attacking the players. And then once the orcs are all dead, the players are like, "Hold on, let's talk here. What's going on?" And the drow are like, "We're here for the dragon egg." And the players are like, "Well, our job is only to make sure that our bad guy doesn't get the dragon egg. The letter of the law doesn't say we actually don't care who has the dragon egg as long as it's not the bad guy.
Okay.
So you guys can just have it." And the drow are like, "Okay, happy trails, thanks." And they go away. Well, that dragon egg is important for another one of my campaigns that I'm running at the same time as this one that this group of players doesn't even know exists.
Wow. Okay.
Right? And so a couple months later, one of my players is like, "What happened with those drow and that dragon egg?" And I'm like, "Well, let me tell you. It turns out this, that, and the other is happening in one of my other games." And they're like, "Wait, that's the same world?" And I'm like, "It's." And then I showed him my world hex map, and I'm like, "Yeah, here's Harkenwald where you guys are. They're going to Dawn Harbor, which is down south." And he goes, "I'm from Dawn Harbor." And I'm like, "I know. I told you about that city because it exists in my world, and I've ran in it for, the last year."
Yeah, that is really cool. I like that. Well, let's get into the campaign world then. What's the physical world like?
The map itself is I call it it's the geography of it is the people in the world really consider it two continents, like a east half and a west half, but it's really just one continent, and it's the exact layout of the United States.
Okay. Yep.
I took the United States and I even took the mountains and all of that stuff, and I just overlaid fantasy stuff on it.
More
And,
common than you'd think it would be.
Yeah. I just needed a shape, and it was one that I'm familiar with. And there's a South continent that I often reference that I have literally no development on. I have every ancestry that is in the player's handbook is available, and no other ones are there. The exception is half orcs. Half orcs don't exist in my world. You just play an orc.
Okay.
And what else? I have lots of stupid lore that probably no one cares about to make all of my fantasy ancestries different.
Well, that's what we're here for. So you said let's start with orcs.
Well, the orcs. So my orcs are basically like the next generation Klingons, right? It's like a long time ago there was a big orc war, and then one guy came and he like united a bunch of the disparate orc tribes, and then he went to the government and was like, "Hey, we would really like to not be nomadic raiders anymore." And like they lost a war a long time ago and were like forced to be nomadic raiders, and like their religion was taken from them. And this guy like found an old orc religious text that referred to like a messiah coming back to unite the tribes, and it's like, "I found the text. Clearly that's me."
Okay.
It says in the text that he who finds it shall unite and he's like, "Clearly that's me." And everybody's like, "Go for it." And there are some orc groups that are like, "That guy's a false prophet. We don't like him. He can, go do what he wants." And as a result, those guys become like outliers. They become bandits. And the rule is like, orc bandits are treated as bandits first and orcs second. If you find a group of orcs, you wouldn't attack them on sight any more than you would attack elves or dwarves. There can be dwarves who are doing bad things. There can be orcs that are doing bad things. And there can also be orcs that are doing good things.
Okay. Yeah. So how long ago did that happen within your campaign world?
Within the lifetime of this one dude, so I'm not 100%. No one knows how long orcs live because they normally don't live to see old age.
Gotcha.
Oh, the uniting of the orc clans was 20 years ago, according to my document.
Okay, cool.
This is my other thing. I don't know anything unless I've written it down and have to go look at it.
That's just fine. Everyone's got their own system for stuff.
The current year, 2629. I knew it had a 9 in it.
26, 29. What's that
All the best years
counting
ended
based
in
off of?
It counts from the date of Dwarven and Elven first contact.
Okay.
Because the dwarves are atheists, and they're atheists because they used to believe that the gods roamed along the surface of the world. And then one day they got to the surface of the world, and there were elves. These tall, thin, wafy things that didn't even have beards.
Oh man.
And they're like, okay, clearly these aren't the gods.
Of course.
The gods must not exist.
I fully understand that reasoning.
And so then the elves are like, okay, well, come to our village, hang out. And then like a couple hours go by and the sun goes down and they start freaking out because they're like, what's going on? Why is it getting dark? And they're like, that's the sun. And they're like, what is, and they're like, this happens every day. This happens all the time.
What's
like,
day?
Yeah. Well, they're like, what's day? And they're like, I don't know, the time between when the sun goes down and the moon comes up, and then the moon goes down and the sun comes up. And the dwarves are like, how long has it been doing this? And they're like, forever. And they're like, how many times has it happened though? And they're like, I don't know, forever. And they're like, you don't count it? Why don't you count it? Oh my God, this literally is insane to us. We need to start counting literally from now.
Okay, and there's the number.
So it's been 2,629 years. And a year is, how many years? Is it 10 months in a year? 2 10 days is a month. 10 days is 10 days.
Right.
Oh, and the days are literally in Dwarvish. They translate to 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, etc.
Got to do the counting.
Yeah. Like the dwarves are just very interested in order and systematic stuff. In fact, the thing that bothers them the most, the dwarves consider this a personal failing. The world has 3 moons, but the way they rotate, it looks, you only ever see 2 of them.
Okay.
Right? And so the dwarves think everybody thinks there are 2 moons. And the fact that the dwarves can't figure out the rotation of the 2 moons to align with the calendar is like a moral failing on their part, they consider. They're like, if only we were better, we would be able to reconcile the 2 moons cycle with the calendar, but we can't. And it's because they don't know there's a 3rd moon that fucks the whole thing up.
So they can't tell the difference by just looking at it?
The rotation of them is so messed up, and the way that the shadows are. I'm not a scientist, so I don't actually know how this works.
I just mean like our moon has like a distinctive pattern on it that it was different. You would probably notice.
I don't know, man. It's a fantasy world.
Okay, cool.
This is where like there is some degree of, I don't know, man. I just work here.
That's fair. I mean, easy explanation is there aren't asteroids that are giving those kinds of shapes to the moon, so it's just flat.
Yeah, I mean, no one's ever been to the moon in my game, so I haven't had to make it up.
Yeah.
That's kind of the other thing, is I have only barely made it up if I'm gonna use it.
Yeah, that's a good rule to have.
So the stuff that I've like ran campaigns in and around is like highly developed and detailed, and then the stuff that isn't is just nothing. Like I have almost nothing for halflings because no one has played a halfling.
Oh, okay. Well, you were mentioning like dwarves and elves right after the orc Klingon thing. I thought they were going to be like humans and Vulcans, but that sounds like that is not how that meeting went.
Oh no, it didn't. No, because the elves are very accepting. They're basically a utopia, except within themselves, because they are constantly there's like a cold war between the wood elves and the high elves.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
You'd have to ask an elf. I don't know.
Great. I'll get right on that. Okay, so
I mean, it was before the dwarves showed up, so who knows? But the elves can they can actually change their gender and relative appearance at will, and so like their whole society has like no gender norms, right? They don't care about stuff like that, so they're super accepting of like gay people and trans people and stuff like that, and like their whole society is just like we accept all sorts of different people. We don't care about stuff like that. And the dwarves have no gender; they're just one gender.
Okay.
Their pronoun is dwarf.
Cool. How does that work for reproduction for them, or are
they build new dwarves out of rocks?
Oh, okay. I can.
And they grind down gems to make magic to imbue them with that. And as a result, when this bleeds into all my other games, because a lot of these ideas are just my ideas, and so they bleed into my other stuff like Crawl. Like when dwarves die, they become stone again. So dwarven undead are like stone golems.
Oh, cool. What did you mean by Crawl there? Is that another
yeah, Crawl is a game. So the main thing that I do at Tidal Wave Games is I developed a game called See You Space Cowboy, which is a Cowboy Bebop and other 90s space anime inspired tabletop RPG where you hunt bounties for money and deal with your past trauma and make friends along the way. Maybe the real bounty was the friends we made along the way. I don't know. And I made like a low fantasy hack of it called Crawl that I'm still working on.
Oh, okay.
That I'm also explicitly building my Dungeon 23 dungeon to be set in. And that takes place in an entirely different world that basically is just all the unique stuff that I've built without all of the stuff that I had to put into my world because it's in D&D.
Right. Okay.
Like as I'm sort of developing the idea of this world, I'm like, I don't need goblins or kobolds or bugbears or things like that. These are not things that interest me.
Or halflings, it sounds like.
No, halflings are in there. They're called fobbits.
Okay.
I just don't have anything for them is all.
Okay.
I'm interested in them. I like them. And if a player came to me and was like, can I be a halfling? I'd be like, okay. And then I would figure out what their deal is. But nobody has came to me and wanted to be a halfling. So I don't really know anything about them. But yeah, Crawl is going to take place in its own world that has all of this similar ancestry,
right,
cultural stuff that I've invented or stolen from other places because I like it. And it's not going to have things that I don't want, which is like kobolds and bugbears and stuff like that. But those things have to be in my D&D world because they're in D&D, and you know, people expect them to be there.
Okay. Yeah. No, I get that. I feel like you still can do that for some of those items, like bugbears. I feel like you could easily ignore in D&D. They don't really show.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you don't have to do them, but it's like I paid for the book, right?
True.
Whereas for Crawl and my Dungeon 23 project, I have to invent the idea of what a bugbear is for my thing. And if I'm not interested in a bugbear to invent something for it, I just won't have it.
I had a question about gods for your world, because we mentioned like the dwarves coming up and then becoming atheists. Are there gods in your world?
Oh yeah, there are a ton. There are tons of them. There used to be dwarven gods. Actually, when the dwarves were like, hey, we've been to the surface. Turns out, no gods. We're not going to believe in gods anymore. Everybody cool with that? And there was a group of them, and they were like, actually, no, we think you're stupid. There definitely are gods. They're just higher than the surface, probably. And or maybe they're deeper. Maybe we need to go deeper. We don't know.
I never thought
we'll
of
figure that out later.
Yeah.
And so they split off, and they eventually evolve into the Dwagar.
Okay.
For my world. And so the Dwagar are like dwarven religious fanatics, and they call themselves the faithful, and they call normal dwarves the renegades.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
It sucks that my Underdark game doesn't have any dwarves in it because that I don't get to use any of that.
That's too bad.
The Dwagar show up, and actually one of the players he came from another campaign down in Dawn Harbor, and now he's up here in the Underdark. And so he's fought Dwagar before, because the Dwagar were the main foot soldiers in my Dragon Heist campaign for the Xanathar. Because I ran that campaign, but I did not run it by the book. I used every villain. I ran it at a higher level, and I decided that the Xanathars he's a beholder.
Right.
And I think in the book he mostly has like human dudes working for him, and I was like, that's stupid. He should have classic AD&D dungeon monsters working for him.
Well, he's got mostly humans because he's in Waterdeep, right?
Well, my version of Waterdeep is Dawn Harbor. It's different.
Okay, of course.
And so it's just a little different. I like my name better. I have a different map, and I changed some stuff. But so I was like, he should have like classic dungeon monsters, because the idea of, I want to rob this bank, let's send an Umber Hulk to do it, is awesome. And so whenever I needed just like 4 dudes to send against the party who were Xanathar aligned, I used Dwagar.
Okay.
So this other player has fought a lot of Dwagar, and now he ran into one, and he immediately wanted to kill it, but he had been screwed up by magic mushrooms. So the rest of the party was like, "Look, don't mess with him. He's nice. He's just high."
Ah. So you're using like the 5th edition Dwagar, right? Not the 4th edition ones with like the porcupine quills?
No, I'm using the 5th edition one.
Okay, good.
They're just dwarves, but they got gray skin.
Right. That always struck me as a odd change to make.
I mean, 4th edition was full of that. It was like, let's re-examine this from a new perspective and do what we think is cool. It might be different than what other people think is cool, and you don't have to use it as a result of that, but it's an idea, which is, that I find, is better than a lot of what 5th edition does, which is like either not have an idea or have an idea from 1979 that nobody has really re-examined in the intervening.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. There were plenty of monsters that feel like there's nothing here in 5th edition, where there was much more of an identity in 4th edition that I could feel from just the mechanics, instead of, oh, it's a giant, it hits with a big club.
Yeah, I think I might run a 4E game in like 2025.
Man, if you want to, it's there. I'm wrapping up my 4th edition campaign around now.
You have fun doing it?
I did like doing the campaign. It's much easier for DMs to run, because you can just grab a monster and it is really unique and makes stuff
like.
really, really fun just from like designing encounters.
Yeah, I think if your group is like super into like having conversations for 4 hours and not fighting anything, it's probably not good for you.
Right.
But the people that I play with, if I'm around the table for an hour and they haven't rolled initiative yet, they start looking for things to kill.
Yeah, I felt like the game doesn't have a lot of support for stuff outside of combat, but D&D never has had a lot of support for stuff outside of combat.
Right, that's the thing. You could sit around and have a conversation for an hour in 4th edition, and it's going to roll exactly the same way as it does in 5th.
Right, exactly, yeah. And 4th edition actually, I feel like, had some better support with like skill challenges and stuff than 5th edition did, but it's hard to execute that in a way that's good. I think
that a lot of problems that people have with 5th edition are that it has all these big utility spells that are just, I solve this encounter by using a spell slot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And 4th edition doesn't have that, because a lot of its powers are explicitly based around combat instead of something else. It has some, like, they call them utility powers, but they're not nearly as many.
Well, it has the rituals for 4th edition.
Yeah, there's that too.
But my experience is that my players have mostly ignored those. They've used they've used the messenger ritual. That's about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's there. There's support for it. I even had like an adventure that was based around, hey, you guys need to go get rituals because you probably should get some, and then they never used them. So I feel like that's something that maybe a different group would get into. Yeah, go ahead.
I love the idea of designing adventures around what is in the game mechanics and like teaching the players the game mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
In Against the Cult of the Reptile God, I had discovered while reading the rule book, after we had been playing for almost a year, the concentration was a thing.
Oh.
We had been playing for a year without concentration. And we were only like level 4, so it was fine.
Yeah.
But literally, like, we had we had a warlock who had guidance through some feat or something like that. And before almost anything, he would be like, I smack everybody with guidance, so you all have an extra D4 on a roll that you want. And it's like, that's not how it works. You can't hold it because it's a concentration spell. You can only give it to one person, and it only lasts 10 minutes. He would at the beginning be like, "I smack everyone with guidance," and then we would just have this extra D4 all night, not knowing. And when we would use it, he would go, "I run over and I hit you with guidance again, so you have your D4 again." So I discovered that concentration was a thing, and I was like, "Oh, I should introduce this to the players. How do I do this?" And there's an evil priest in Against the Cult of the Reptile God. And so when the players came up to him, I had him use banishment on one of the players. And so I said, he flicks his fingers and he says some words, and you disappear into a whiteless void. You're in a whiteless void. The other two, you just see him disappear. Okay, it's your turn now. And he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, your friend just disappeared. What do you want to do? And so they're like begging the evil priest to like bring their friend back. They're like, I don't, and I'm like, why are you doing this? And they're like, well, what if we hit him and he dies and our friend is trapped in the void forever?
That's how it works in a lot of other fantasies. Like,
right. That's a perfectly reasonable assumption. But finally, someone was like, well, I don't care if our friend is trapped forever. If he's trapped forever either way. So I'm just gonna kill this guy. And as soon as I hit him, I was like, okay, he makes his concentration check because he took damage, and he fails. And Doc shows back up, and they're like, his concentration check. And I'm like, yeah, he has to concentrate on that spell. Look at your spells. Some of them might be concentration. And then all of a sudden, they're all looking at their spells they have written down, and they go, oh, this is concentration. What does that mean? And then I explained.
Right. The hazards of early play.
But I think the idea of like designing adventures and parts of your world to teach things to the players is really, really fun, and I think kind of a next level thing that like is beyond just let's get together, kill some orcs, and roll some dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was one of my friends was running us through a Pathfinder adventure that's like a intro adventure. So it's supposed to show off all these mechanics, and it's set up as like the elders of a town are having you go through like a reenactment of an adventure. It's like you'll fall down a pit trap, but there's a bunch of pillows at the bottom. So it's really just like, hey, this is how a pit trap works.
And see that I don't like that because there's no danger.
Well, there is danger. Like later on, deeper in the dungeon, you find out the elders got attacked by skeletons that were deeper in the tomb.
Okay,
so
that's all right.
Yeah, it works out. But the initial part of it is like, okay, we're learning this mechanic now. I see. And that's great for first-time players that aren't coming from other RPGs. I think it's a really good way to learn the system because you get all of these introductions to different parts of the game, and it is, this encounter teaches you about ranged attacks and other stuff like that. But yeah,
that's something that I'm really trying to drill into myself. Is when you're building a dungeon or a session, to look at what your players are capable of, in a general sense and in a specific sense, and design it around that. I just recently I printed out the skills list for Crawl so that I have it handy when I'm doing my Dungeon 23 thing, which I'm explicitly designing for Crawl, so I can look and see what can the players actually do, so that I can build something that challenges those abilities. And then also, I feel like when players make choices at character creation, they're making a choice. And so you have to reward that choice at some point. Otherwise, they wasted it. If a player plays a cleric, they have turn undead. If you never fight undead, they wasted their choice being a cleric.
Exactly.
Now clerics kind of a whole lot of other pieces, and maybe that player doesn't even care about turn undead. It's just something that they get, and they've never looked at it since they got it, right? That's fine too. You have to know your players and what they expect out of the game. But a player who like picks a feat that pushes dudes and they never get to push any dudes, they could have picked a feat that does anything else and had a better time.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen a lot on Reddit for some people talking about how like their character becomes immune to a type of damage, and then that type of damage
damage never
stops
comes
showing
up.
up anymore as soon as they're immune to it.
Yeah.
I've designed encounters explicitly where it's like, okay, so they are good at this type of damage, so I'm gonna put something in here that's vulnerable to it, just because I should occasionally reward them for it.
Yeah. Sly Flourish calls this a lightning rod.
Mhm.
He says that there should be things in your encounters where it's like very obvious what we should do here. Like if there's a player who likes to banish things, put a big troll there with 130 hit points and a big club, and it's like, oh yeah, it would really suck if this guy got banished right now.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, you want them to banish it.
Yep.
Cool. Then they go, we banish it. Okay, he's gone. Yay. And then everybody feels cool, and it's like, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been doing undead for a lot of my campaign, so a lot of my players are doing like radiant damage. It's undead are vulnerable to, so they're getting to do bonus damage there. And now they're facing the necromancer in charge of the undead, who knows that they're doing radiant damage and is wearing a ring of radiant resistance. They're feeling a little bit bad. Man, I feel like we still skipped over the gods because you talked more about like the dwarven relationship with them with the Dwargar, but we didn't talk about like the actual gods up in the sky or wherever they are.
Oh yeah, I got tons of them. I got a whole thing. I got ones I haven't even thought of yet. Every ancestry kind of has their own pantheon that are similar but different. The humans have one that's all. So the continent is called Aerda because the humans believe that there was air and duh, and then they would like came together and they built the world together, and then they birthed a bunch of the other gods, and then those gods like, oh, they started a war and all this other stuff happened. There was one named Prometheus. I steal a lot from Greek mythology just because I like it. Prometheus gave magic to humans.
Gotcha.
Which was forbidden, and then he was cast down to the abyss, and then he led a rebellion in the abyss to like overtake the gods, because the abyss are like the cursed first children of the gods.
Okay.
Like the air, I think is air or duh. Yeah, air is the like male god, and he like didn't like the chaos of natural evolution, so he was like, I'm gonna create my own gods. But because he's like, I'm gonna create my own children, my own like servants on the world that we've created together.
Okay.
But because he was doing it by himself, they were just chaos. They were just like these, they like killed each other and they hated each other. They're like pure hatred. And so he's like, well, that didn't work. Clearly I screwed something up here. And he like seals them away in this place he calls the Stygian Abyss.
Gotcha.
And those become demons, right? That's what demons are.
Okay.
And so he like goes to his wife with like his hands behind his back and his tail between his legs. He's like, hey, I tried to make life and I screwed it up. Can you help me? She's like, yes, I can help you. And then they created, she's like, what you have to do is you have to watch over the world and influence its natural thing. You can't just create stuff out of nothing. And so and she was like, so we'll create these other guys called the Titans, and the Titans will help the development of the humans.
Okay.
We'll create Atlas. He will lift up the world and do all of this stuff. And we will create Prometheus. Prometheus is in charge of human evolution. And one day he was like, Prometheus is like, yeah, but it would be cool if they had magic. The elves have magic and the dwarves have magic, because once they created this world, all these sort of other gods started to come in and be like, hey, you made a world? Can I throw something in? And they're like, yeah, you can throw something in. It's a big world, right?
Yeah.
There's room for all sorts of stuff. So the dwarf god is like, bam, I got these little stone guys, and they're like, that's cool. I got these, and the elf gods come along, and they're like, what about if we made these like wafy, sexy dudes who change gender? And they're like, that's weird, but okay.
Right.
And they're like, what if there were some short guys? What if there was dragon dudes? Actually, the dragonborn don't show up for a while.
Okay. Well, giants, goblins, all the other stuff too.
Yeah. And then, well, some stuff is just natural evolution, right?
Right.
This idea is that the world can't be directly influenced on by the gods, right? They're just like the law is they're not allowed to like pass into the material realm. So they have to like subtly influence it. And really there's like layers of messed up metaphor here, because also the gods get their power from belief. So what it is I don't like the idea of everything being clean and fact. This is the legends that I'm telling you. This is what people believe happened.
Oh, okay.
Is it literally what happened? I actually don't know. But like when enough people come together and believe Air and Da created the world together, does that make it literally true?
That's kind of like the idea for the Theros campaign world.
Yeah, there's some of that in. It's not an uncommon idea. But like the idea of like, well, the orcs were like led by their evil god Orcus, and they led a holy war against the world. Well, did the orcs just believe in Orcus, or did Orcus send them on a holy war? Is it the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Does it matter? If the fact that they said Orcus has sent us on this holy war and they all believe it, does that mean Orcus now has declared war? Whether he was going to do that in quote unquote reality or not, it's like so abstract in that way, and I like that. Even though there are literal planes of existence where these gods do hang out and you can visit them. But the thing about the planes of existence for me is like, I hate the idea of codifying too much. I see Reddit posts that are like, how do my players need to get to the astral plane. How can they do that? And I'm like, figure out a way that works for right now, because it doesn't have to work a month from now. Like, and the things that you put in the astral plane or the ethereal plane or the plane of fire or whatever you want to do, they don't have to match up with any other time any other group goes there. Because these are like, we as actual human beings in the real world, we are incapable of understanding the fourth dimensional arrangement that is required for this kind of stuff to exist.
Right.
But we could experience it, and so could the players in your game. And so when they go there, or the process of going there, they don't need to understand it. It works, and then they're on the plane of fire or whatever, and they experience it, and it doesn't make sense, but it does work. If what I'm saying makes any degree of sense. It's like the experiences they have are true and real, but then if you try and connect the dots in a way that makes any sense, it won't. It can't, because we as human beings in the real world are incapable of mapping this in a way that works.
Yeah, I think that's actually some good advice for how to run that, because you want to have like an otherworldly feel to the planes when they do show up. So having them be sort of malleable and not concrete in their design can be a positive.
Right. They like it should operate on dream logic.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you're having a weird dream, you walk from you're in your bedroom in the real world, and then you walk through a door and you're in your high school, and that doesn't make any sense, but that would make sense in a strange and different place. And then if you try to go back, you don't go back to your room, you go to your elementary school. Like, that's just how the things work in this world. And you're experiencing it, and your experience is true. But trying to make sense of it just leads to madness.
Yeah, that's the whole point of Astral Plane outside of D&D, is it's like this world of dreams.
Right. Like, I tell players, better men than you have tried to understand this and failed.
Right. This reminds me of a Sandman comic where there's a bunch of cats that are trying to dream that they're the dominant species instead of humans.
Yeah. I love the Sandman. I loved the show. The show was really good.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet, but
they did that episode.
They did? Oh, cool.
Yeah, they did that one. Not only did they did that one, but they released the whole first season, and then they released 2 more episodes like a month later. And they didn't tell anybody. They just stealth dropped them in there.
It
was nuts. I was like, whoa, really? Because I'd finished the show and I was like, wow, that was good. I'm going to tell everybody about it. And then like a week later, my friend was like, hey, they put 2 new episodes up.
Cool. Okay, so you got tons of gods. You got Aaron does the main ones for at least how people view them, and then you've got a lot of racial gods. Is there anything else?
Well, Aaron like left.
Oh, okay.
A big recurring theme is that the gods show up, they do stuff, and then we piss them off and they leave, and they kind of leave another set of gods behind.
Oh, okay.
Which sort of, I think, mirrors the way in the real world, like, cultures rise and they fall. Like right now, we believe that the Greek gods were myths. We call them myths, but people actually believed that was how the world worked at one point, and now they don't. Now they believe something else. So it's like the Greek gods existed, and then they left, and now the Christian God is here.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
Right, and that's that's like a recurring theme between a bunch of the pantheons. Like the Elven pantheon, there was like a set of 4 gods, and then they all had children, and those children are now the gods that everybody prays to because the other gods left. And the actual reality is, I think the Elf War started because they blame each side of the 2 elves blame the other for the first group of gods leaving.
I think that's something that's in Forgotten Realms too, where there's all these like
It probably is.
pantheon. Like there's a giant pantheon that's like old and dead and undying now. There's a dragon pantheon that's like that. There's the whatever the mind flayers are doing are kind of like that too. It's all these like dead empires and their gods are decaying along with them. Okay, we already talked about your races a little bit. Wanted to talk about like your actual campaign that you're running. I guess we did already kind of touch on that. Is there a overarching plot to your current one? I guess 2 months might not be enough time to get into deep stuff there for like world.
You'd be surprised.
Okay.
You would be surprised. God, there's 2 going. So there's a group called the Heirs of the Dragon Lord, which is my version of the Cult of the Dragon from Forgotten Realms. I like to take a lot of Forgotten Realms stuff and change the names that I think they're just stupid. And they are
just fine. They're
currently trying to summon Takesis, and if you're a Dragonlance fan, you know who that is. And if you're not, this is a spoiler, so I have to be quiet so my wife doesn't hear. It's Tiamat.
Okay.
Right? But they don't know that. And the cult doesn't even know that because she's been locked in hell for so long. She kind of uses different personalities to try and reemerge her influence on the world and like get revived. Actually, one of my players, he started in my other friend's Curse of Strahd game, right? He's Dragonborn, and their backstory, he said, he was like, can I be the child of the 2 dragon gods? Because this player is just really into dragons. He's played 3 Dragonborn in different games.
Cool.
Right? And he's like, can I be like the son of Bahamut and Tiamat? And my DM, who is a super newbie, is like, yeah, sure, why not? Right? And so then he's a warlock, and he's like, oh, I have to have a warlock patron? Okay. And he looks in the book, and he's like, Tyranthraxis. That's a cool name. I want to serve that guy.
Okay.
Right? Having no idea who he is. Tyranthraxis is the bad guy from the old Gold Box PC AD&D game Pool of Radiance, which I mentioned earlier, which is a Forgotten Realms adventure. And Tyranthraxis is like an elder god who, like, I think he possesses a dragon, and then the dragon does a bunch of evil shit, and you have to go kill the dragon.
Of course.
Right. So I was like, well, okay. So when my friend's Curse of Strahd game that he was in wrapped up, we leave in the Vistani, which is the Vistani can kind of go between Ravenloft and the Prime Material world. So they're like, we described them getting in a carriage, and they go through basically the Willy Wonka tunnel, right? There's Technicolor lights everywhere.
Right.
And then I grab the DM screen from my friend and put it in front of me, right? And this is after I've been running my game for a couple years, so it's not weird for me to be behind the screen. But I take the screen from him, and I put it in front of me, and I stand up, and I describe a big black tentacle coming from the Technicolor dreamscape, and it rips open the side of the carriage, and it steals Kriv, the Dragonborn, and it steals him out. And I actually have my barbarian character, who's like his best friend. I like have him roll strength saves in order to do it, but every time I'm like, he doesn't beat 30, so he fails. Right? And so Kriv gets pulled out, and now Kriv is gone. And so the carriage arrives at the Prime Material of my friend's campaign, and I give the screen back. And then when I started this next campaign, I described the exact same scene. I said, Kriv, you're in the carriage. And, this tentacle comes out. And Morteth, he rolls his strength save, and he doesn't get 30. And you are pulled out. And you appear on a spaceship that is crashing toward the desert. And that spaceship was an Illithid spaceship, a Mind Flayer spaceship, that was just crashing to the ground. And there were 3 Githyanki on it. And the other 3 players got to play these Githyanki who had been trapped.
Cool.
And this Dragonborn just appeared next to them. And they're like, okay, can we get out of the restraints? They got out of the restraints. And it's like crashing, and they like fight a Mind Flayer, and then the thing crashes. And Kriv survives, so now he's in my game, right? And so here's the thing. Tyrant Thraxis in my game is also cheap.
Oh.
So this player is getting messages from Tyrant Thraxis telling him, you need to go to the Pool of Radiance and you need to become possessed by Tyrant Thraxis. And that will give you great power, enough to smite your enemies. And the bad guys are also going to the Pool of Radiance to summon Takesis. Because Takesis is like, you need to go to the Pool of Radiance and summon me in order to crush your enemies. So they're both going there to summon Tiamat. And neither of them know it.
That's pretty cool. I like that a lot.
So there's going to be this big moment. And also, my wife in that game is playing as her first character from my abandoned game.
Oh, okay.
The game that the Lost Mines of Phandelver game. She played this orc bard who raps a lot, named Eminem. Right?
Classic.
And so she's like, now she's level 8, 9, 10. And so I have the Dragonborn show up to fight them, and they're led by one of her old party members, one of my other friends who doesn't play with us anymore, who had a Dragonborn, who, it turns out in their backstory, one of my friends has grabbed the player's handbook and just like, I guess this guy's a paladin, he needs to have a god. What are the gods? And looks in the back and sees Takesis, Dragonlance. Okay, that sounds cool. And writes it down, not even knowing what that means.
Right.
And so I'm like, yes, I'm going to take this. And so I took the old mini out that I haven't used for like 3 years, and I put it down, and my wife goes, is that a placeholder for something? I go, no, that's him. You look and you see your old friend, and he's leading the charge, and he's mad. and so like, I have all of this crazy stuff. Tiamat is doing this because obviously she just wants to be a part of the prime material, but also Hell is falling apart because Hell is adjacent to Ravenloft. And so my friend was running Curse of Strahd. He was running a Ravenloft game. And when he finished, normally what happens is the players kill Strahd, and then Strahd is supposed to come back. Strahd is like Dracula.
Right.
And so I was like, but what would be cool is if we did Castlevania 2. And my friend goes, what happens in Castlevania 2? I said, at the end of the first Castlevania, you kill Dracula. And then they spread his body parts all throughout Transylvania. And then because of that, the Transylvania starts to decay. It starts to like break down. And that's the curse of like Dracula. And so Simon Belmont has to go around where they buried all the parts of Dracula and get them and bring back Dracula in order to end the curse. And so I was like, I said to my friend, I said, what if that's what we did? What if that's the sequel to our Curse of Strahd game? The parts of Strahd are everywhere, and Ravenloft is falling apart. Like, because normally Strahd comes back in like 10 or 20 years. It's been 50 years in Ravenloft, and he hasn't shown again. And like, stuff starts getting weird. Like, parts of the place are falling apart. People are dying, and they're coming back to life in ways that they normally don't. Places are aging at different rates. Like some people, like you'll leave town and you'll come back, and 100 years have passed for them.
Oof.
And you're a day late, right? You're like a day older. Like stuff like that is happening. One part of Ravenloft just fell off and fell into another plane of existence. It's just gone, and no one knows where it is. A doom train ran through Eberron. What is going on? Like, that's not even part of the same cosmology. What's happening here? Like this is not, Ravenloft is supposed to be a contained space. It's leaking out and it's falling apart. it must be because there's only the only thing holding this place together is Strahd. As horrible and sadistic and awful as he is and the world was under him, it's actually worse without him. And so part of that is all these like sub villains of Ravenloft from like second edition, like Azalin the Lich, and I invented one called Carmilla, who's like kind of a Castlevania character.
Yep.
They're like coming into my world, and Lord Soth especially. They're all like coming into my campaign world because like they're getting out of Ravenloft. They're like, my house is falling apart. I need to go somewhere else. Like Lord Soth is currently building a fortress of undead bodies in the middle of my campaign world, and no one is investigating.
That sounds like a really deep shared mythology you have between
Oh
you
yeah,
and your group. That's really cool.
I just go nuts on this stuff because I think it's cool. Because I think the beauty of having a campaign world is that it's a shared world. Everything that you do can take place in it, and I think it's kind of like a little bit upsetting to not use that.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said earlier about like trying to honor your players' choices and have them have an impact. And when we were talking about mechanics for that, but it seems like you're also doing that for the outcomes of adventures and stuff like that. That's really cool. That's a really great way to DM.
Yeah, because like I said, this Underdark game that I'm running, it's got Tanner from Dawn Harbor, it's got Eminem from my Lost Mines of Phandelver game, and it's got Kriv from our Ravenloft game. It's got 3 player characters who are just like from different campaigns that we've run, and they're all hanging out together. It's like our own little Avengers.
Yeah.
And then 7 or 8 of them are gonna all meet up in the middle to deal with this Lord Soth problem because I think in the book he's a wizard, but I made him into a druid. There's a druid in Against the Cult of the Reptile God, and he is, players don't know this, he's Mordenkainen.
Ooh.
He's like in disguise, right? And so this is a spoiler for Curse of Strahd. Mordenkainen is in Curse of Strahd. But he doesn't know who he is, and he lost his spell book, and like Strahd cursed him, so he doesn't have a memory anymore, right? So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna have Lord Soth, the druid is gonna invite everybody back to Orlane, and he's also gonna invite a bunch of dudes who he's never met, but who he heard or killed a big dragon up north, which is a different campaign that I'm running, right? And so all these guys are gonna come together, and so some of my players will be playing as 2 characters, right, for this big meeting. And they're all gonna like hang out together for like a day, and then the druid is gonna be like, listen, I'm actually the wizard Mordenkainen. I'm kind of a big deal. And this dude named Lord Soth, he came from a place called Ravenloft. He has a magic item called the Codex of Ultimate Influence, which like raises his charisma to 30 and like basically gives him the ability to like mind control people. And like he's unstoppable with this. We need we're gonna go confront him and see what we can learn and do that. And the players are gonna go do that, and Lord Soth is gonna tear open a hole to Ravenloft and throw Mordenkainen into it so that he can be part of the Curse of Strahd campaign that we already completed and back in time, because the way Ravenloft is right now and the way the Planes of Existence work, the time doesn't match up.
Right.
So he's actually going to get thrown back before Lord Soth even left to go do what he's doing now, let alone when he throws him in, right? It's going to be like they're going to freak out because they're going to be like, oh my God, that's because we met him and he lost his memory. This happened to him already. And they're going to freak out. And then one of my players I'm going to tell one of my players that they recognize the Codex of Ultimate Influence because their culture has one. Because one of my players, my wife, one of her characters is playing like a sort of like an I don't want to say like island girl, like a Mesoamerican Aztec girl from like an island, and she's like a priestess. She's kind of like Storm from X-Men.
Okay.
She's like a priestess who like summons storms and like believes in like Quetzalcoatl and stuff like that, right? And so she like left her home so that she could find her sister, who was kidnapped in Against the Cult of the Reptile God. And so like now she's gonna see the Codex of Ultimate Influence and be like, hey, and once they get away from him, they're gonna be like, hey, your culture has one of these. You call it the Tablets of Destiny. you should probably go home and see what's up with that. That might be able to stop this guy.
Okay.
And then so they're going to go on this big water journey, and then they're going to go on this huge island hex crawl, which is one part X1, the Isle of Dread from like 1981, and one part Tomb of Annihilation from 5th edition, with a whole bunch of other crap thrown in there.
Okay.
And so, that's going to happen, and then they're going to stop Lord Soth. And then eventually, after that, I think that's kind of that's the big end of my meta plot. They'll probably be 15th level by then. And then eventually, they're going to have to go back to Ravenloft to put Strahd back together.
Yeah, I was going to ask what level they were, because this is sounding like some pretty epic stuff here.
The people in, when they go to Chult, they're going to be 8th level, and the people in the Underdark just got to 10th.
Okay, so decently high. They can start doing like world stuff at that level.
Right. And the people who, I say they killed a dragon, they haven't killed the dragon yet, but they're going to when we get around to it. Because some of these players are all the same group of players. A lot of it happens because of like weird scheduling stuff where one player is like, I can't play for a couple months. So we get this other guy, and now he's part of the group. And so I didn't want to drop him. I was all set to run the Chult campaign. We're all going to go to Chult, this big island. It's going to be a big hex crawl. We're all going to be level 8. But this guy has like only played D&D once or twice,
right,
and he's never played with us. So I didn't want to drop him in on like, hey, first of all, here's all this stuff with Mordenkainen and Lord Soth and Ravenloft that you don't know anything about. Now you're going to go on a desert hex crawl for the next 4 months of your life. And by the way, you're level 8. So good luck. Like I didn't want to do that to this poor guy. So I was like, let's just start a whole new campaign with brand new level 1 characters, and you're all fighting a dragon. There's a dragon who moved into the area, and he screwed everything up.
Man, there's so many things going on there. That's
in 2 months.
Yeah.
I actually think that the reason everything is starting to happen at one time is because I think the world's going to end. Because I've already like announced to my players that toward the end of 2024, which is hopefully when all of this stuff kind of converges and wraps up, I'm gonna stop running 5th edition or the new edition that they're coming out with. I'm like not gonna run Pathfinder or anything else. I'm literally gonna close the book on this world and put it away and not run it. Just because like I said, a lot of the stuff that's in it is there because it's there in D&D and not because I'm excited or passionate about it.
Right.
And when you sort of build a big map over 4 years, there are like ideas in here that I just don't like anymore because I came up with them in 2018, 2019, right? They're not how I would do things now, but it's canon for the world that we're playing in. So, and I don't want to retcon it and mess with it too much because some of my players' backstories and stuff rely on this. So I think it'll be easier to just like, number one, I'm going to stop running the system because I don't know if I'm going to like the 1D&D system that they're doing. And so I might just work on my own like offshoot that combines the best of what I like of 5e and 1D&D and Tales of the Valiant, which is like Cobalt Press's thing, and I might do that. Or by then, the MCDM RPG is probably going to be out, and I might just run in that world and have fun.
You got to do Torches and Rations.
Well, yeah, we're probably going to play Torches and Rations. I'm actually definitely going to play it at the convention I'm running.
You're running a convention?
No, I'm running at a convention.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm like going to a convention to sell my books and stuff like that.
Yeah, everyone's got to do that.
When people like my dad are like, "What is this thing you're doing?" I'm like, "It's the nerd flea market." He goes, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more like a show floor kind of like. I don't know.
Not this one.
Okay.
It's more like a flea market.
All right. Yeah. Fair enough. I've seen like some stuff that's like that. Like at a state fair, there's like a flea market section and then there's like a show floor section. That's like a bit of both.
Oh yeah, we don't have anything that fancy.
Yeah. Well, and that's usually for like food and like cooking implements and that kind of thing was what I saw there. Well, anyway, it's not relevant to what you're doing. Yeah, I also wanted to talk about like the Tidal Wave Games stuff you're doing. So you have Sea Space Cowboy released, and that's kind of obvious what that's based off of, Cowboy Bebop.
Yep.
How does that work as a system?
Oh, it's completely different. So it's partially inspired by like Powered by the Apocalypse games, where like the core idea is that you don't just have binary pass and fail. You have success, partial success, or success with complication, and then failure.
Right.
Right. And so the PBTA games use 2d6, and then their numbers are always the same. I use different dice for different stats. If you're what are they called? I can't remember now because I've been thinking about Dwarves and Elves. They're called muscles, moves, brains, and cool, which are actually the stats directly taken from the Ghostbusters RPG.
Okay.
And when you create your character, you assign a D6, a D8, a D10, and a D12 to your stats. Right? So your muscles might be D12 and your brains is D6. Okay. And so anytime you do a muscles thing, like break stuff or get in a fist fight or handle a big weapon or knock someone out, you would roll your muscles stat. You also have a talent, which you get to make up. Talents are like, what am I really good at? Like, here are just examples of muscles talents. Break stuff, eat food, elbow grease, kick open a door, kicking, get these hands, lift stuff, pro wrestling, yeet.
Great. That's those are some
right. And so it's like,
right
am
there.
I yeeting? Then I get an extra D4.
Okay.
If I'm not yeeting, I don't get a D4, right? And so, you can figure out how you want to do this. They can be as narrow and specific or broad as you want. Like you can say kicking a door. And now if I have to kick in a door, I get that D4. But if I just write kicking, now I get the D4 anytime I kick. And so, you're sort of encouraged to like, if I have a D12 muscles, I'm probably going to do pretty good all the time. I don't necessarily need the bonus. But if I have D6 brains, maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm this hyper-specific thing or this broad thing, like math. If it has math, I get a D4. Whereas quantum physics is something that might not come up very often. And this is part of what I talk about when your player characters make choices. They're wasting their choice if you don't incorporate that. I always ask the players, what did you write down for your talents? And then I write if I write down some of them. Now, there's 4 talents per character, so that's like 12 to 16 talents, depending on how many players you have, probably. You can't incorporate everyone every game. That's impossible.
No, of course not.
But, you can make it, you make the effort. Right? Like one player, he wrote, I'm good at opening things with my teeth. And I'm like, I need to find a place for that. 'Cause it's too weird not to use. That's what he wrote. I don't question it.
But was like the bomb diffuser in like a bag of chips or something? Like what?
I don't know. I don't remember what I did to fix that, but I did. I let him use it.
Okay.
What else is in there? There's debts or regrets. So you have to choose. You either messed up really bad in your past, or you owe someone a lot of money because you're by definition a bounty hunter.
Right.
You take people and you take them into the police industrial state for money, right? Because they just don't have enough cops for everybody who's done bad things. And so like normal people don't do that. They get a job somewhere, but you can't have a job because your trauma from your dead partner is haunting you, or you owe so much money because of a cybernetic arm implant that you had to get that like this corporation lords it over you. And if you don't pay them back, eventually they send assassins after you. Right. And so like I can't get a normal job because a normal job would be able to sustain me eating, but I actually have to pay $60,000 for my robot arm. So there's that. There's a whole equipment list. It doesn't really have hit points, but it does have wounds, and you can take 5 wounds before you fall unconscious, and then you're just unconscious. Like you can't die.
Okay.
I was like, unless you want to die. If you're like, this is actually the narratively like satisfying time for me to die, then you can die if you want. But like for the most part, like what happens in Spike Spiegel, that dude falls out of like a 9th story window, and at the end of the episode he's wrapped up in bandages, and in the next episode he's okay.
Yeah, I feel like that is a bit of a shift in RPGs to move away from death as a threat to your character and just having unconsciousness be enough?
It just depends on the genre, I think.
Yeah.
Because Crawl has death, but that's because, death is important. But Crawl also has resurrection mechanics built right in. It's like you can take the body to the church, and for 1,000 gold times their level, you can get them revived. And that's probably not worth it for a first level character, but if you have like a 4th or 5th level character and you have enough money, that might be worth it. And also, the other thing is that in Crawl and the world of Crawl, and I wish this was something that I could really just put into my D&D game, bodies that are left unburied become undead. That's how undead happen.
Ah, okay.
Right? So it's like, my friend died in the dungeon, and like after a week, he will turn into a zombie. He will turn into a zombie if we don't bury him. So it's like, if you had to run because there was an ogre and he killed your friend and you're like, I don't even have time to get the body. Let's go. Let's leave. If you go back a week later, now there's an ogre and a zombie and he has all your friend's stuff on him.
Right. I guess one of my questions there is what happens if you like chop up the body but leave it there?
Well, it can, I mean, the process of them becoming undead is like magic, right? It's chaos magic. So they can just reanimate and become like a Frankenstein thing.
Okay.
Or eventually, well, here's the thing. Eventually, they'll decay into a skeleton, and then the skeleton can put itself back together.
Oh, yeah, I guess that, yeah. There's no real connection there at that point.
Yeah. A big thing with Crawl is like, I got tired of like realism in games.
Uh-huh.
In a weird way. It's like, I didn't want to deal with, I put a rust monster in a room one time. And the rust monster is like 10, it's like a 2x2, it's like a 10-foot big creature, right? And every exit into this room was like a 5-foot door. And one of the players is like, how did this even get in here? And I was like, how would you, and I pulled the BS move, which is, how would your character figure that out? Right? That's a question you as the player are asking, but the reality is you actually have no method of finding out how that would be because you weren't here when it wasn't here and you didn't see it come in.
Right.
How would your character get that information? Which is a cop-out, admittedly. And I wanted an explanation for that rather than the answer is I wanted a rust monster in this room. I don't care how it got in here. You have to fight the rust monster.
Right.
And so the idea I came up with for Crawl and that world is that places that are left abandoned generate monsters.
Ooh.
Like if there's no life and order in it, chaos overtakes the place. So if you leave a place alone long enough, like rat men and beast dudes show up.
It's just like early germ theory where instead of germs being like these microscopic organisms, it was instead like germs came from rats and insects, which instead of having their own reproductive cycles, just spawned out of piles of garbage.
Exactly. Stuff like that. Stuff that literally isn't true, but in a magical fantasy world could be true.
Yeah.
Like blinks twice when you're like, bad things spawn in places that are left unattended because that's the forces of chaos at work. And they're like, right, the forces of chaos, those are bad, right?
I assume so.
And the same thing with like the players fought a bunch of like rat dudes with swords, and one of the players was like, "Can I take their swords?" And I'm like, "Well, these are creatures of chaos, so their swords are chaos. Like if you grabbed it and tried to use it, you would have disadvantage on every attack that you made with it. And if you tried to take it out of the dungeon, the sunlight would make it evaporate." And they're like, "Whoa, that's really cool." And it's like, actually, I just don't want you to steal weapons from everybody.
Why does that work for treasure then?
Treasure isn't born of chaos.
Oh, okay.
It's lost and abandoned in these places.
Gotcha.
Like not every like a monster could have a magic weapon that they found, and then if they die, you could get it.
This is also reminding me of the theater concept of like a ghost light that you leave in the theater to keep the ghosts away.
Yeah, there's all kinds of like weird superstitious stuff that the world has had, and I just think it's interesting to draw on all that and make it real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sunlight destroying those kind of monsters is definitely a very common thing in folktales.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. It's like, well, if there's all these like rat dudes and like chaos beastmen and medusas and stuff in literally like a floor down in this like castle. Why aren't they out in the countryside and stuff like that? Well, they get destroyed by sunlight, so that's why.
Yeah, it's got a really, I mean, you were talking about like Castlevania. It's got a really Castlevania feel to it as well when you think about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can come out at nighttime, so then the monsters have this like incentive to like kill the sun somehow, so that they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, like they could come out at night. I haven't really addressed that. Crawl doesn't have any overland travel yet.
It's just there's the dungeon. You go in there.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, you're in town. What do you want? Okay, now you're in the dungeon.
Well, I mean, it's in the system name. You already know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, you could do a hex crawl with it eventually. Is part of the thing. That's a different type of crawl.
Right. It's true.
But also, I'm still tweaking the system. I'm still adding stuff to the equipment list and figuring out exactly how I want some of the numbers and stuff to work. So like when I playtest, I want to get as much juice for the squeeze as I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of tell people, I'm like, you can do some role playing and stuff, but like we can't spend an hour talking around the campfire. We got to get stuff done because I got to see how this works. And a lot of the players like, cool, let's go. Like they completed 10 rooms in like 2 hours last time, and they were like, can we keep playing? And I'm like, I actually literally have to go to work like right now. I'm gonna be late. So no, we can't keep playing. And they're like, when can we play again? Because me and him, we just went through 10 rooms. That's 10 XP. That's enough to level up.
That's cool. So is this the same like basic system as CU Space Cowboy with like the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's the same like dice attribute thing. I renamed them to strength and dex and charisma and intelligence, and and I got a lot of the CU Space Cowboy stuff is like goofy is the wrong word, but it's like loose,
lighthearted.
It's like it says on the thing. It says sci-fi space bounty hunter jazz fusion role playing game, right? Like break stuff is the thing. You wouldn't call it that in a like dark fantasy game that looks like Bloodborne or Elden Ring, right?
No, you vandalize.
Like the thing to break into computer systems is called hack the planet. That's appropriate for CU Space Cowboy. It's not appropriate for Crawl.
Gotcha. I was gonna say earlier that sounds really similar to how Savage Worlds has the setup for different attributes, like a different die.
There's a little bit of Savage Worlds in the DNA of all this.
Yeah. I mean, it's different enough with the way you're having the talents be distributed. Like I get that, and the deaths and regrets is obviously different as well.
A big weird thing with me is that like I spent a lot of the like late 2000s just reading RPG books and wishing I could play. Just like I read every system and every license that I could get my grubby little pirate hands on.
Did you read through the Ghostbusters books eventually?
Oh, I ran Ghostbusters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ghostbusters is great. It's one of my biggest.
Oh, right. Yeah, you said you ran it for your family. That's right. I don't remember.
Yeah, I ran it for like my dad and brother. I ran it for a while. I tried to run it online. It didn't really work because one of the things with Ghostbusters is it has a ghost die. It's a D6 dice pool system. It's actually the first dice pool system ever invented. And one of the dice is the ghost die. It's a regular white die, but the 6 is the Ghostbusters symbol. And every time you roll the ghost die. And if it comes up the ghost symbol, something bad happens. Even if the number is like really good, if the ghost die happens, it's like, yeah, you did it really good, but now something bad happens. And if you roll badly and you get the ghost die, something really, really bad happens.
Gotcha.
That's kind of an idea I want to implement for Sand, which is kind of a game we're working on the side. I have like extreme ADHD, so I just like keep coming up with new ideas and projects.
It's a common thing for inventors.
Sand is sort of like our weird Dune clone.
Dune, like
on a desert planet.
the Arrakis
like the
thing.
Book in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, like Arrakis. We're like, what if it's like it's that, and it's Tatooine, and it's like Trigun influenced and stuff like that, and it's like humans crashed here. We're just trying to get by. It's all D6s. There's no hit points. You make up all the equipment.
Okay.
And the idea is that we would build like 36 hexes, and you would go through them randomly and do a bunch of stuff, and they would like really highly interconnect, like like you wouldn't never make up your own encounters for sand. You would just run them out of the book, and like each encounter would be like you get this item from doing it if you did it right, and then a different encounter would be like if you have this item from encounter XY, then this happens instead.
Okay, so this is
And
more
they would be
like
like highly tooled and
Gloomhaven or something
designed.
like that.
Kinda. It's very like almost that kind of like advanced board gamey thing, but we're framing it as a role playing game, and it would. I want to do it in a box set. It would have like a rule. It would have like a rule book and then an encounter booklet, and maybe it would have a bunch of like hex tiles.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, you'd want to have like just
And it
maps
would
you
come with
pull
its own
out.
dice.
Yeah,
But that's all way in the future.
gotcha. I was thinking like the ghost eye mechanic also sounds like how 10 Candles handles stuff, where
Oh yeah, there's something like that in there too.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I've read that one. Cool.
Oh, if there's an RPG, the chances are really good that I have read it. I devour this stuff. I am on Exalted Funeral and Spear Witch all the time, getting new stuff. I'm really into Fist right now. I am super into Wolves Upon the Coast by Luke Gearing and his monster supplement, Monsters Volume 2, Monsters and. That's just insane. That is the best 2-page spread of it's a monster book, and the spread of goblins and gnolls is the best 2-page spread I have read in any RPG in the last 4 years.
Cool. What did you say this one was called again?
It's called Volume 2 Monsters and it's basically the monster supplement for a big product called Wolves Upon the Coast by Luke Gearing.
All right, writing it down for myself.
Yeah, which Wolves Upon the Coast is a humongous hex crawl. It's 250 pages. It has no formatting and it has no art, and it's $50.
Woo. Okay.
And it's amazing.
Once you get into it,
like,
I'm sure.
It might be the best RPG product released in like the last 2 years.
All right, I guess there's one obscure one that I've been trying to get someone's opinion on. Maybe you've played it or read it. Chin the Warring States.
I have not heard of it.
Okay. So I was trying to find an RPG that's set like based around playing in the Warring States, like ancient China period, but not necessarily like wushu stuff that a lot of them focus on for that. So this one's more like a historical setting for that era.
$34, that's not bad. I assume it says like 100, right?
I'm not actually sure. But it's got no reviews. I read about it when I like just trying to
It has no review. Here's why it has no preview.
Right, yeah.
I don't know how many pages this thing has.
Yep, it's just got.
Oh, I don't get the bestiary as part of it. Oh man, that's rough. That's a rough product to put out, my dude. Come on.
Yeah, and then the author is like looks like French, so I'm not even sure if like is this translated well. It's another issue I'm looking out for it. Okay, well I was hoping you'd had a recommendation for that, but it sounds like
no,
you
don't.
Okay.
No, Chinese history is like my blind spot.
Yeah, I've been getting really into it lately, so I'm trying to find an RPG that would work. Well,
yeah, you don't want the Dynasty Warriors take. You want something a little more gritty.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't be like terribly upset by that, but I was hoping there was an alternative. Like, there's plenty of the wushu things that I could pick from.
Yeah,
and you could.
Yeah, you don't want to kill 50 guys in one attack. That's not what you're.
And you could even just use D&D for that. You don't need a different set, like a different system.
Yeah,
you could use 5th edition just fine for that. You could use 4th edition. You could use. I don't know. I found like a bunch of like things that were adaptions of other systems for that type of setting. So I feel like I was covered there, but like trying to find a system that was grounded for that was difficult.
Yeah, the like Southeast Asia RPG scene is like a big blind spot for me. I'm seeing a lot of people from it popping up on my Twitter, which is very interesting, and I just don't I just don't have a lot of time to engage with it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Otherwise, another thing about like Asia RPGs is China doesn't really do that. Like they don't have any like internally produced RPGs.
I would probably say that they definitely exist. We just don't see them over here.
Right. Yeah. I suppose that's a better way of putting it. There aren't any that have reached outside of the
Yeah, to get them
country.
translated is probably like a huge pain in the butt.
Well, like,
I mean, Wizards of the Coast is having problems getting D&D translated in other countries, and it's the biggest one that exists.
yeah, like Black Eye is the big one in Germany, just because it's.
Aren't they? Didn't they just put out an English version of that?
Yeah, it was pretty recent. They were only in German for a long time.
I would like to read that, although it probably just turns out being Warhammer.
I don't know enough about it, but
I know the Dark Eye is a D100, I think, and I know Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is definitely D100.
oh, okay. I thought you meant like for the setting aspect of it.
No. I'm sure the setting is completely different, but I'm sure mechanically it probably resembles Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean now. Yeah.
But I could be talking out of my butt. I don't know. I'd have to read it.
Well, going from that, one of the other things I usually ask people is like, do they have any interesting mechanics for their world? When you've got all this stuff that you're designing yourself, are you bringing any of that into your D&D campaign as well?
Oh yeah, I have put so much homebrew stuff in my game that it like sort of only resembles D&D in a lot of the base class and ancestry design, right? Like I have homebrew weapons that do all kinds of crazy stuff. My humans are actually homebrew stat wise.
Oh,
They have I give them the ability to they can sense magic by touching and by smelling it.
okay.
Like and they're the only ones that can do that. I think by the rules anyone can like just touch a magic item and be like, "Hey, this is magical. I know this is a magic item." So then I can now we know we have to identify it and do all the stuff. I just give that to humans because they sort of evolved naturally and were gifted magic by Prometheus. They unlike dwarves and elves and stuff like that who were born out of magic. Like they're literally magically created.
I see.
And that's how they reproduce. The dwarves reproduce by magically they ground up rocks and stuff like that. And the elves reproduce, they hold hands and they kiss is what they do. And boom, you're pregnant.
Cool.
And you're pregnant for 2 years.
Oh man.
And the first human that happened to freaked the hell out because they were like, "When does this end?" And they're like, "Oh, about 2 years." And they're like, 2 years?
For a half elf you were talking about?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
well. Okay.
Because this goes deep. As part of the war, one of my players in their backstory, they set off a like magical bomb that like infected all of the elves and made them unable to reproduce with each other. So there hasn't been an elf born in almost 1,000 years.
Wow. Okay.
So every elf that's in my game is at least 1,000 years old. Like you can't have a regular elf
Okay.
baby anymore. It's just and like the player regrets it and it's part of his tragic backstory and all that. It's partially inspired by the Solarian and Krogan genophage from Mass Effect, if you've ever played that.
Yeah, I was thinking that the reproduction outside of the race is also like the I'm forgetting what the blue people are called.
The Asari.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some of that too.
But yeah, definitely the genophage portion.
So yeah,
of
there's
that.
some ideas of that in there, but like yeah, so like humans can like sense magic. If there's anytime the players find anything in one of my games, they're like, "Hey human, touch this." And it's like your arm, when you touch it, your arm vibrates like you just hit your funny bone off of something. And you smell like burning ozone. And they're like, "Yeah, this is magical."
So it sounds like you could also train like just a normal animal to do that.
No, because they don't have the sense to do it.
Oh, they weren't gifted magic. Only humans.
They weren't.
I see.
Right. Like because of the unique interaction of like humans being evolved, and then they were like given the ability to cast magic. Like this is like a unique property of them because they're like supernaturally attuned to it through magic.
Right. Well, it's all magic, however deep you go, I guess.
But like just a different. It's not inside of them, but it is part of them. If that makes any sense.
Right. So half elves don't have that ability because they have like the
half elves don't get that because they're more elf than human.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for talking about that. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that just about does it. I talked all about my games. I talked about my homebrew nonsense and stuff like that.
Yeah. You've also given some really good advice. Usually I ask people if they have any other advice they want to give. You've already given a
Oh yeah,
ton of good
I'm
stuff here.
all about that. I just want people to run their games better, and all you really got to do is think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And not worry so much about the game part of it, because the game part can be complicated, and I think people get too wrapped up in like, I gotta balance this encounter, and it's like, no, you don't. Just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. You'll get a feel for it eventually, because it's an art, it's not a science, right? And it doesn't matter how balanced something is in one way, or whether it's perfectly balanced or it's overtuned. A good day for the players, where they're really thinking on their feet, can crush an encounter that is like twice their CR. And a bad day for the players, they can get smushed by something that is weaker than them.
Yeah.
I had a group of 8th level players. They fought 2 bullets, 2 land sharks in the desert, right? And the fighter character ran. I made a mistake, I think, because I almost never do like terrain or like weird features in my stuff. A lot of my people will criticize me for this, but a lot of my fights take place in a featureless boxy room. And my players like that. They're just cool with that, and they don't mind. And so I don't push it, right?
Yeah.
But this one time they were in the desert, and I was like, oh, I laid down my wet erase grid, and I was like, oh, and there's a big rock here. And so immediately the big rock becomes like a point of contention. 3 of the players climb up on the rock. 1 is sneaking around to look for it. Like, now they're using the rock. And I'm like, cool, they're using the rock. But so the fighter character is like, I'm a melee fighter. He has a +2 Vorpal sword that gives him psychic damage if he doesn't use it. Right? It's like a cursed magic item, and it talks to him, and it does all this crazy stuff. Right? And he likes it, and it's a big plot point. So he likes using it. So he doesn't mind running. And with his strength, he has like +11 to hit. So he almost never misses. So it's fine. And if he gets a 20, he cuts the head off of almost anything.
Right.
Right. So he runs to the bullet, and he starts attacking it. And the other players are like hanging out on top of the rock. Like they're swinging spells and doing stuff from up there, but they're like watching him fight the land shark. And he's like, I think I got this. I hit this one like 2 or 3 times. It could only have so many hit points. It'll be fine. And then the other one comes up behind him, right? Because he's the guy on the ground and everyone else is on the rock.
Right.
And so he gets double teamed by these 2 bullets, and they only do like, I think maybe they did like 2d8 damage, and one of them missed or something like that, right? But he just got like sandwiched between these 2, and he just got screwed over. He was down, and then he attacked him again, and he got 2 failed death saves, and it was over. He was dead, right? And the players were like, when I was like driving to work after that, my wife was like, what happened there? And I'm like, Francis ran in like an idiot, and none of you backed him up. And she's like, well, what was I supposed to do? Go down there? And I'm like, probably that would have helped. Because then the other bullet would have attacked you and not him, and he wouldn't have died. Now, it was fine, because for plot reasons, they came across a different guy, and they had a scroll of Revivify. So the player didn't lose anything, and I ended up fast-forwarding through a bunch of the desert stuff. But, you know, nobody was upset when it happened, either. The fighter player was like, I'm screwed up, I died, oh well. They were just, like, interested in, like, what could we have done different to not have that happen? And I'm like, you made a tactical error. You didn't play well. At the end of the day, that's what it was. These guys were combined were CR10. You're level 8. It wasn't that big of a challenge. Not that big of a deal. You fought tougher things before and made it out just fine. But for whatever reason today, he didn't retreat at the right time. Nobody backed him up. You didn't do it. You just didn't play well, and somebody died. And that's just the way the dice roll sometimes, or the decisions you make.
I was thinking of that. There's like a scene in Tremors, I think, where there's like a kid that's out like in the dirt away from a building, so they have to like distract the monsters.
The graboid.
So that the kid can get to safety. I was thinking they could have done something like that.
Yeah, they could have done anything, but they they just like. Well, I think one of them was literally like, "I'm gonna wait and see what happens." I'm like, "What do you think is gonna happen, dude?" And he's like, "I don't know. I'm gonna see." And then if he,
That's always my reaction when I see someone in imminent danger of their life. I'm just gonna wait and see what happens.
It probably didn't help that for plot reasons, the fighter had an item called the Crown of Asmodeus, and the other guy worked for Asmodeus, and his secret agenda was to steal the Crown of Asmodeus.
Oh, okay. Running like
So
a
probably that
paranoia
didn't help.
campaign there.
He kept as he was dying, like that other player is looking at me like, "Should I just?" And I'm like, "What do you want to do?" And he's like, "I run down. He's dead, right? Dead. He's not in death saves." I'm like, "Yeah, he's dead." He's like, "Okay, so he's unattuned from the crown." And I go, "Yeah." He's like, "I take the crown and I teleport away." And the other player's like, "What?" And he's like, "I work for Asmodeus. Bye."
Well, yeah, there you go.
And that was my idea to make him work for Asmodeus, by the way. I had planned for it to happen way later. I had planned for it to happen at this big showdown at the Pool of Radiance. But Tanner screwed up and died. So then that guy had to make a wizard.
Yeah, that's a good story, definitely. Yeah, anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. I was just thinking that this episode is probably going to come out July 19th.
Okay.
So it's probably going to be after your June convention. Do you have any like late July or August conventions that you wanted to?
No, I don't have anything planned for the summer, but hopefully by mid-July we will have Ceres, the Planet That Never Sleeps, which is the setting and bounty module for CU Space Cowboy, will be up by then, and I will be on time with my Patreon updates for my Dungeon 23. So if you go to my Patreon at patreon.com/TidalWaveGames, you can get for $1 you can get semi-monthly updates on my Dungeon 23 dungeons, which is just every day I'm doing a dungeon room, and then at the end of the month I'll put it in a document and I put the map there, and then you can run it, you can play it. And you also get cool stuff like the beta of Crawl is on there. There's a few bounty modules for CU Space Cowboy on there, and some other miscellaneous stuff. Everything else should be available at our physical store is store.tidalwavegames.com. Exalted Funeral is about to get copies of CU Space Cowboy in, so by July those will definitely be on their store. If you want to get it from there and pick up some other cool stuff. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks, OnslaughtSix. This is great. And yeah, you've got your own website too. But yeah, Tidal Wave Games is probably the best place to find all the gaming.
Yeah, TidalWaveGames.com will link you to everything, including all the storefronts. We have a drive-through. We have an itch. We have all that stuff. OnslaughtSix.com is like a dumping ground for my thoughts about RPGs. And also you can find a link there where I post everything that I've ever done, like creatively, including all my music.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks a lot. This is really good.
All right, thank you.
We are looking for more people to interview, so if you're a DM or you know a DM that might be interested in coming on the show, you can check out more about how to apply at www.gocorral.com/STS.
I don't know if I find. Let me get my Word.
Okay, yeah, we can. This will be one of those things we can edit
This
out.
is my art order spreadsheet. That's very important. Not what I need right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's telling me what art still. Let's see. Mass Effect Adjace, Dungeon 23, Runes of Castle Gagar, The Heart of Darkness, Brawl version 03, Crestfall Fantasy, BX Cyberpunk Hack, Altars and Monuments, Elf Cybernetics Catalog, Wave Games, Torches and Rations, Sand. These are just all the side projects I have.
Yeah, I recognize the names from going on your website. So, Torches and Rations sounded like the funniest one to me.
Torches and Rations is great. You can go get it right now. I think it's free. Is it free or is it $1? I think it's free.
I mean,
Torches
if it's
and
$1,
Rations,
it's basically free.
I just got mad at somebody. Somebody literally said to me, if you're not tracking torches and rations, you're not playing D&D. It's a real thing someone said to me on Twitter. And I got so upset that I made a game where the only things you do are track torches and rations.
So is this like a beer and peanuts game? What's the...
It can be. It's, I don't know. I haven't really played it.
Oh my god. Designed a game and put it up on the internet, but you've never actually touched it to play it.
Well, look, what? I'm gonna get 4 people together to play torches and rations? Come on, man.
You know what? Fair.